It doesn't begin with cruelty. It begins with flowers, with words that feel like poetry, a man who makes a woman feel chosen, seen, special. He tells her, I've never felt this way before, and she believes him, because who wouldn't? But some storms arrive, wrapped in sunshine. A narcissistic husband does not come to love her fully. He comes to reflect himself in her. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the love she thought was safe becomes a cage. Today, we will unravel that journey, the hidden dangers and the awakening that can set her free. It always starts quietly, almost beautifully, in a way that feels like destiny rather than danger. The first keynote, The Silent Beginning, is about how narcissistic abuse never announces itself. It doesn't arrive as cruelty or control. It arrives as charm, as attention, as intensity that feels flattering rather than frightening. The husband, in the beginning, appears deeply invested. He listens closely, remembers small details, mirrors her values, her dreams, her fears. He makes her feel understood, in a way she may never have felt before, as if he has finally seen the real her. This phase creates emotional attachment quickly because it feels rare and magical. What the wife experiences is not love yet, but idealization. She is placed on a pedestal, admired not for who she truly is, but for how perfectly she reflects his needs. He floods her with affection, compliments, and promises of a future that feels safe and certain. This emotional intensity builds trust fast, often bypassing healthy caution. She begins to believe she has found someone who truly values her. The danger of the silent beginning lies in how subtly it conditions her. When love feels overwhelming and extraordinary, she becomes emotionally invested before she has time to notice inconsistencies. Small red flags are dismissed because the overall picture feels so good. Any discomfort is outweighed by his charm. Any concern is softened by his apologies or grand gestures. She learns, without realizing it, to associate love with emotional highs. This phase is silent because nothing appears wrong on the surface. Friends admire the relationship. Family sees devotion. The wife feels chosen. But underneath, the foundation is already uneven. The love is not mutual growth. It is emotional dependence being formed. The silent beginning is powerful because by the time the control emerges, the emotional bond is already strong. She is not walking into abuse, she is slowly being led into it, believing the entire time that she is walking toward love. And once that emotional bond is formed, once love has been made to feel like oxygen, something begins to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gradually, almost invisibly. This is where the slow erasure begins. The pedestal he once placed her on becomes an unstable ground, and without warning, she starts feeling smaller while standing in the same place. The admiration softens, the intense listening fades. In its place comes correction disguised as concern. It begins with little things, a joke she makes that he doesn't like, an opinion he subtly dismisses, a tone he claims feels disrespectful. He no longer says, I love how you think, but instead asks, why do you always overreact? She starts adjusting, not because she wants to disappear, but because she wants peace. Each adjustment feels harmless on its own, but together they form a pattern, one where her authentic self is slowly edited out of the relationship. What makes this erasure so powerful is that it doesn't feel forced. It feels chosen. She tells herself she's being mature, flexible, understanding. She begins to filter her words before speaking, soften her emotions before expressing them, shrink her needs before voicing them. Over time, she stops recognizing the version of herself she once was, not because she changed intentionally, but because she learned that being fully herself comes with consequences. He rarely demands silence outright. Instead, he rewards compliance with approval and punishes honesty with withdrawal, a cold tone, emotional distance, disappointment that lingers in the air. And so she learns. She learns which parts of her are welcomed and which are not. Slowly, unconsciously, she abandons the parts that create tension. This is the quiet tragedy of the second stage. She is not being erased by force, but by survival. She is still there, still breathing, still loving, but less visible, less confident, less free. And while he remains whole, certain, and unchallenged, she is left wondering why she feels lost inside a life she worked so hard to build. And when a woman has learned to make herself smaller, when she has adjusted enough times to keep the peace, the nature of love itself quietly changes. What once felt freely given now begins to feel earned. This is where love turns transactional. Affection no longer flows naturally, it is distributed selectively, measured carefully, and often withheld as a form of control. She starts to notice patterns. When she agrees with him, he is warm. When she complies, he is kind. When she prioritizes his needs over her own, there is harmony. But the moment she disagrees, questions, or asserts herself, something is taken away. The warmth disappears. The silence arrives. Eye contact fades. The house feels colder, even when no words are spoken. Love becomes something she must work for, something she must protect by behaving correctly. In this dynamic, love is no longer about connection, it becomes a reward system. He may not say it out loud, but the message is clear. Approval is conditional. She begins to anticipate what version of herself will be accepted today. She becomes hyper aware of his moods, his reactions, his expectations, because her emotional safety now depends on meeting them. This is exhausting, but she convinces herself that this is what commitment looks like. The most painful part is that she still remembers the beginning. She remembers the man who gave love freely, who adored her without conditions, so she keeps trying, believing that if she just does enough, gives enough, sacrifices enough, that version of him will return. But what she doesn't yet see is that the love she is chasing us never meant to be sustained. It was bait, not a bond. And so she pours more of herself into the relationship, unaware that she is negotiating for basic affection. She apologizes more. She compromises deeper. She accepts less. Love, once a shared experience, becomes a performance. And in trying to earn what should have been freely given, she begins to forget a crucial truth. Real love does not keep score, and it never makes someone beg to be valued. And when love becomes something she must earn, the ground beneath her reality begins to shift. Because once affection is conditional, truth itself becomes negotiable. This is where gaslighting quietly enters, not as a single lie, but as a steady erosion of her trust in her own perception. Every time she questions the unfairness of his silence or the pain of his withdrawal, he reframes it. He tells her she's misunderstanding him, that she's overthinking, that she's too emotional to see things clearly. At first, she resists. She remembers what she felt. She knows something is wrong. But he speaks with such certainty, such confidence, that doubt slowly creeps in. He insists he never said what she clearly remembers. He denies the tone she felt in his words. He minimizes moments that deeply wounded her, calling them insignificant. And because she wants peace, because she still hopes to be loved freely again, she starts to question herself instead of him. Over time, this becomes an internal war. Her emotions tell her one story, his. Words tell another, and each time she chooses to believe him over herself, a piece of her intuition goes quiet. She stops trusting her memory. She stops trusting her reactions. She starts asking permission for her own feelings. What once felt like clarity now feels like confusion. This is not accidental. A woman who doubts herself is easier to control. When she no longer trusts her own reality, he becomes the authority on what is true and what is not. He decides when she is hurt for a reason and when she is being dramatic. He becomes the judge of her emotions, the narrator of her experiences, and the most devastating part is this: she doesn't feel manipulated, she feels flawed. She believes the problem lives inside her. Gaslighting doesn't just distort reality, it steals self-trust. And without self-trust, she becomes dependent on the very person causing her pain to tell her who she is and how she should feel. And when a woman no longer trusts her own reality, the contrast between what the world sees and what she lives becomes almost unbearable. This is where the performance begins. To everyone else, he appears admirable, attentive, accomplished, even affectionate. He speaks highly of her in public, holds her hand at gatherings, tells stories that paint him as devoted and supportive. People look at them and say, "You're so lucky." And she forces a smile because explaining the truth feels impossible. Behind closed doors, the warmth disappears. The man who charms the world becomes distant, critical, or cold. Praise is replaced with silence. Eye contact is withheld. Affection is rationed. And because he is so convincing in public, she begins to feel isolated in her pain. If everyone else thinks he's wonderful, then surely the problem must be her. That belief, planted by gaslighting, now takes deeper root. This split reality is deeply damaging. She lives two lives at once, one where she plays the role of the grateful wife, and another where she carries unspoken pain. She learns to protect his image even while it costs her emotional safety. She covers for his behavior. She minimizes her suffering. She becomes the guardian of a truth she is not allowed to speak. What makes this stage especially cruel is how alone it feels. Abuse that happens in the dark is easier to question, but abuse that hides behind praise and reputation makes her doubt whether anyone would believe her at all. She tells herself she should be thankful. After all, he doesn't hit her. He provides. He smiles in public. So why does she feel so empty? The answer lies in the disconnect. Being celebrated in public does not erase being diminished in private. Applause cannot heal emotional neglect. The more she watches him be kind to the world while withholding kindness from her, the more she feels invisible, seen by everyone, known by no one. And in that loneliness, she begins to understand that image can be louder than truth and far more dangerous, and that invisibility follows her home. It settles into the quiet moments, the spaces where intimacy should live. Because when pain is hidden behind a perfect image, loneliness becomes a constant companion. This is the loneliness of being married yet emotionally abandoned. She is not alone in the house, but she is alone in her heart. Conversations stay shallow. Vulnerability feels unsafe. The person who should know her most no longer reaches for her at all. She may sit beside him on the couch, share a bed with him at night, move through daily routines as a couple, yet feel completely unseen. When she tries to speak from her heart, he deflects, dismisses, or turns the focus back to himself. Her emotions are treated as inconveniences. Her need for connection is framed as neediness. And so she learns to stop asking, not because she doesn't need closeness, but because rejection has taught her silence. This kind of loneliness is especially painful because it is invisible. There is no dramatic ending, no explosive argument, no clear moment to point to, just a slow, aching absence of emotional safety. She misses him even while he's right there. She grieves a connection that technically still exists, but no longer feels alive. And because the outside world sees a marriage that looks stable, she carries this loneliness quietly. She tells herself that every marriage has seasons, that she's expecting too much, that maybe emotional intimacy is a luxury, not a necessity. But deep down, she knows something essential is missing. The most heartbreaking part is that she starts to feel lonely, even within herself. Without space to express her thoughts or emotions, they turn inward. She questions whether she deserves more, whether wanting to be emotionally met is unreasonable. And so she survives by numbing, by distracting, by enduring. This is not just the absence of love, it is the absence of being known. And a woman can survive many things, but being emotionally alone in the place where she hoped to be most understood slowly drains the life from her spirit. And yet, even in this quiet loneliness, he often frames his control as concern. This is the insidiousness of manipulation disguised as care. What feels like love or protection is, in fact, another way to tighten the invisible chains. He monitors her choices, questions her decisions, or insists on knowing her every move, all while insisting it's for her own good. Every boundary she tries to set is reframed as stubbornness or ingratitude. Every attempt at independence is called reckless. He presents his demands as guidance, his criticism as advice, and his restrictions as protection. And because she still remembers the early charm, because she still hopes for the return of that unconditional admiration, she often believes him. This masquerade makes it difficult for her to trust her own instincts. She begins to doubt whether her desires are selfish, whether her boundaries are unreasonable, whether she is overreacting. What is framed as care is, in reality, control, a way to ensure she never steps too far outside the life he has defined. The more he controls, the more he convinces her that it is her choice to comply. And the more she complies, the smaller she feels, the quieter she becomes, the more invisible she becomes to herself. And yet, the most dangerous part is that this care feels familiar, almost comforting. It mimics the way love should look: attention, concern, advice. So she clings to it, convincing herself she is fortunate to have someone who wants what's best for her. Meanwhile, her autonomy is eroding. slowly but relentlessly. By the time she realizes the truth, she has been conditioned to accept limitation as affection and restraint as protection. Her heart is still willing to love, but her freedom has been quietly rewritten. She begins to live in a world where love is never simple, never equal, and never truly hers. And that is the cruel brilliance of control disguised as care. Feels like love, but it slowly strips the soul. And living under that guise of care soon becomes a life of constant vigilance, a life where every step, every word, every thought feels measured against an invisible standard. This is the weight of walking on eggshells. She no longer moves freely, she moves carefully, anticipating reactions, rehearsing conversations, softening tones, trimming her truths. Even small actions, a laugh, a glance, a question, are analyzed in advance. Because she has learned that any misstep can trigger withdrawal, criticism, or anger, she becomes a master of preemptive self censorship. The danger of walking on eggshells is how silently it reshapes her world. It starts with tension, a quiet knot in the stomach whenever he enters a room. It grows into vigilance, a constant scanning for moods, expressions, and unspoken cues. It becomes instinct. She knows the shift in his tone before it lands, the flicker of irritation before it escalates, the pause in conversation that signals disappointment. She becomes hyper-aware, living not faux are herself, but to maintain fragile peace. Over time, this tension steals spontaneity, joy, and authenticity. Moments that should be lighthearted are filtered through caution. Decisions that should feel simple become anxiety-ridden. Her laughter is tempered. Her opinions are softened. Even silence becomes strategic. And through it all, he remains largely unaffected, moving through the world with ease, while she bears the invisible burden of constant calculation. What is cruelest is how normalized it becomes. She convinces herself this is life, that this is marriage, that this is love. And the longer she endures, the more her own instincts, her intuition, her spontaneity, her courage are dulled. She lives as though the house itself is fragile, afraid that any misstep could shatter the peace he dictates, and with it, her sense of self. Walking on eggshells is not just fear, it is a slow erosion of the soul, a quiet imprisonment masked as normalcy, and by the time she recognizes it, much of her freedom has already been surrendered. And yet, even under the weight of constant caution, even while her spirit feels muted and her joy restrained, there comes a moment, sometimes sudden, sometimes almost imperceptible, when awareness breaks through. This is the moment of awakening. It might be triggered by a single question she can no longer silence. Is this really what love is supposed to feel like? Or a memory that refuses to be erased, a reminder of the woman she once was before compromise became survival. It can come from a friend's words, a book, a fleeting glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. Whatever the spark, it ignites a profound realization. The life she has been navigating is not love. It is control, manipulation, and self-erasure disguised as devotion. In this awakening, clarity is both painful and liberating. She sees the patterns with precision, the charm that came before control, the affection given only when obedience is met, the constant editing of her own truth to appease another. She recognizes that gaslighting was not about confusion, but about power, that the loneliness she endured was not her fault, but a consequence of someone else's inability to connect honestly. She understands that walking on eggshells and giving love as payment for peace are signs of an unhealthy, unbalanced dynamic, not reflections of her worth. This is the moment where choice emerges. Awareness brings responsibility, not just to survive, but to reclaim herself. She realizes that love does not require submission, that respect is not negotiable, that emotional safety is not optional. And in this realization, courage begins to rise. She may feel fear, doubt, and grief, but she also feels a flicker of power she had long forgotten, the power to redefine her life, to honor her truth, and to refuse a love that costs her soul. This awakening is the turning point, the hinge on which her next steps, her reclamation, will depend. And once awakening takes hold, once she sees clearly the patterns that have shaped her life, the journey moves toward reclaiming self-worth. This is not an instant transformation, nor a simple act of leaving. It is a profound internal shift, a decision to honor herself after years of accommodation, doubt, and diminishment. She begins to recognize that her value was never dependent on his approval, that her voice, her dreams, and her emotions are not luxuries. They are essentials of her humanity. Reclaiming self-worth starts in small ways. She sets boundaries that feel unfamiliar but necessary. She speaks her truth without preemptively softening it to avoid conflict. She allows herself to feel anger, disappointment, and grief without shame, understanding that these emotions are not flaws but indicators of her authenticity. Every assertion, every choice made in alignment with her own values chips away at the invisible walls that have confined her for so long. She remembers the woman she once was, courageous, expressive, alive, and begins to integrate her lost self back into the life she is determined to lead. This journey is not just about separating from someone who diminished her. It is about fully stepping into herself. She may stumble, she may question her strength, she may encounter fear and resistance, but each moment of reclamation is a testament to her resilience. With every decision to honor herself, she rebuilds the confidence and clarity that were eroded over time. Ultimately, reclaiming self-worth is a declaration that love should never demand the sacrifice of identity, that respect is non-negotiable, and that the life she chooses for herself is valuable beyond anyone else's approval. It is a return to authenticity, a refusal to shrink, and a commitment to live openly, fully, and fiercely. In reclaiming herself, she not only survives, she rises. And in that rise, she becomes unstoppable, radiant, and wholly free. And now, as we reach the end of this journey together, I want you to feel the full weight of what we have uncovered, not as spectators, but as witnesses to truth. We have walked through charm that hides control, silence that erodes identity, love that feels earned rather than given, and the quiet devastation of emotional manipulation. We have seen how gaslighting can distort reality, how loneliness can exist in a marriage, and how control can disguise itself as care. We have felt the tension of walking on eggshells and the awakening that comes when the heart refuses to settle for less than it deserves. And finally, we have celebrated the courageous act of our reclaiming self-worth. But this is not just a story about pain. It is a story about strength. It is a story about resilience, awareness, and the indomitable human spirit. Because every woman who has felt diminished, unseen, or controlled holds within her the power to rise. Awareness is the spark, and action is the flame. She may tremble at first, she may hesitate, she may doubt herself, but the very act of recognizing that she deserves respect, love, and freedom is the beginning of transformation. To anyone listening today who has felt trapped, silenced, or invisible, I want you to hear this clearly. Your story does not end with their limitations. Your value is not defined by anyone else's perception. You have the right to be heard, to be honored, to live authentically, and to love without fear or compromise. So let this message stay with you long after these words fade. Let it ignite courage, clarity, and unwavering self-respect. Stand tall, speak your truth, protect your light. And remember, the heart that survives manipulation is not just alive, it shines brighter, rises higher, and inspires all who witness it. Your freedom is waiting, your power is waiting, and your life in all its fullness is waiting for you to claim it.